Dispatch to all units. Case 119A marked closed. Victim officially pronounced dead. No further action required. But listen up. We just received a report from a diner on Route 7. She walked in. Same clothes, same name, no signs of injury. She's alive. Repeat, the victim is alive.
It was supposed to be another cold case, buried beneath paperwork and forgetfulness. Case 119A had been declared closed 7 days ago after exhaustive efforts turned up a single piece of evidence. A shoe found by the riverbank, soaked, torn, and DNA matched to the victim, Emma Rains. A 28-year-old server from a roadside diner, she had gone missing after her night shift ended. Her last known location was a stretch of highway bordered by pine trees and silence. No witnesses, no cameras, no suspects. The search lasted 48 hours before tapering into resignation. The police offered condolences, the family planned a quiet memorial, and the file was sealed with the usual finality of systems built to forget. But this morning, exactly 1 week later, the phone at the local sheriff's station rang at 6:42 a.m., a call from that same diner. The cook's voice trembled as he whispered, "She's here. She's asking about her shift." Officers arrived within minutes, and there she was, Emma. Same height, same freckles, same scar above the left brow. Her uniform still had her name tag. "You're all acting strange," she said, sipping coffee like it was just another Tuesday. She didn't look disoriented. She didn't look injured. But something about her eyes felt off. When asked where she'd been, she blinked slowly and replied, "What do you mean? I was here yesterday. I never left." The room went silent. The sheriff pulled aside the manager. "She's dead. We buried her last Thursday." But Emma, now seated at the counter, was humming a familiar tune from the jukebox. Something old. Something eerily timed with the minute hand of the wall clock, frozen at 2:47 a.m., the exact time she was declared missing. The officers didn't know whether to approach her as a victim or a threat. Detective Miles Kenner, a seasoned investigator, with more closed cases than most of the department combined, was called in immediately. He entered the diner not with urgency, but with the slow, deliberate steps of someone who had seen the impossible before and learned to fear it. Emma looked up at him, eyes calm and expectant, like she recognized him from somewhere he didn't remember. "Detective Kenner," she said before he introduced himself. "Are we doing this again?" That sentence froze him more than the cold outside. She couldn't have known his name. Her hands weren't trembling. Her tone carried no fear, and her pulse, as later measured, was steady, too steady. They asked routine questions. Where had she been? Who was she with? Did she remember anything? Her answers made the air in the room feel heavier. "I was here the whole time," she said again. "No one ever came to check." When shown her own missing person report, she smiled and said, "I don't look like I'm missing, do I?" The sheriff, confused and visibly rattled, ordered that she be taken for medical examination. But before leaving, Emma turned to Kenner and added, "You should check the case file. I left something for you." There was no reason for that to make sense, yet it did. Back at the station, Kenner opened the sealed file. Inside, atop the official report he himself had written, was a folded napkin from the diner. On it, the words, "I remember what you forgot," and a time, 3:17 a.m., Emma's time of death, or supposed death. Kenner stared at it for a long minute. Then, almost involuntarily, he whispered, "How did she know my name?" The footage from the diner's security camera only deepened the strangeness. The external feed showed Emma arriving at exactly 3:17 a.m., walking calmly across the lot, entering through the main door. But the internal feed went black for 23 seconds, just before she stepped inside. When it returned, she was already seated in the booth, flipping through a newspaper that hadn't been delivered in years. Stranger still, her clothes were the same ones she was found wearing a week prior, on the night she was reported missing. blood-stained and torn in identical ways. Yet the medical team confirmed she bore no wounds, no bruises, not even old scarring. No signs of hypothermia, no malnutrition, no dehydration. The watch on her wrist, once catalogued into evidence, was now missing from the locker, but ticking normally on her arm. Detective Kenner revisited the warehouse where her body had supposedly been found. The floor was clean, no blood, no trace, as if the scene had never happened. But when he checked the morgue records, her body had been signed out by someone using his badge number. Kenner hadn't authorized anything. He hadn't even been there that day. Confronted with the paperwork, he recognized his own signature, but he didn't remember writing it. A cold pressure crept down his spine. When he asked to review the body footage from the night of the initial autopsy, the screen glitched, then looped endlessly on a single frame. Emma, eyes open, staring into the lens, lips unmoving, but a whisper somehow recorded in the background. "You're asking the wrong question." Kenner replayed it again and again, trying to decipher what that question might be. And for the first time in years, he felt something he thought he'd buried: dread. Detective Kenner didn't sleep that night. He sat in his car outside the station, watching the sunrise bleed through the city haze, gripping the evidence bag that held Emma's original ID, now inexplicably replaced with a duplicate bearing. A slightly different photo. Her eyes in the second image weren't looking at the camera, but just past it, towards something or someone behind the lens. The badge number was still his, but the signature on the form, not his handwriting, not even close. Forensics couldn't explain the discrepancy. Neither could internal affairs. And when Kenner asked to re-interview Emma, the hospital claimed she had been discharged 2 hours prior, accompanied by her assigned case officer. They showed security footage, a man in a dark coat, face blurred beyond recognition, guiding her calmly through the lobby. No one else in the precinct had issued that order. The digital log of her admittance had been wiped. Kenner's request to pull backup files was denied. Chain of command, they told him. But there was no name above his in this case. No one had claimed jurisdiction. That night, he called her apartment. No answer. He drove there anyway. Inside, the lights were on, candles lit, and a record spinning gently under the needle, though the power had been shut off a week earlier. On the kitchen table, a cup of warm tea, steam still rising, and next to it, a folded napkin with 2 words scrawled in black ink. Ask again. He picked it up with gloved hands, heart racing. Someone had been here, recently, possibly moments ago. But no one answered when he called her name. And when he looked in the hallway mirror, he noticed something else. His reflection wasn't moving, but he was. Kenner stumbled backward from the mirror, breath caught between panic and disbelief. His reflection stared back blankly, unmoving, for just long enough to register as wrong. Then, as he stepped away, it finally mimicked him, too late, too smooth. He blinked hard, splashed water on his face from the sink, and looked again. This time, the reflection matched, or seemed to. But a crack had begun to form in his certainty, and once that fracture opened, it wouldn't close. He called dispatch and asked if any officers had entered the building earlier. They responded with static, followed by a voice that wasn't one. He recognized, "Ask again." He froze. That same phrase, same tone, not a glitch, a message. He hung up without another word and scanned the apartment. Everything looked lived in, but slightly off. A second toothbrush in the holder, clothes in the closet that didn't match Emma's style, even a second set of keys on the hook by the door, labeled with his own name. But he had never given her a copy. Never. He pulled out his phone and checked the date. Still Thursday. But his call history showed a series of outgoing calls to a number he didn't recognize, placed at 3:03 a.m., 3:17 a.m., and again at 3:33 a.m. He hadn't been awake then, hadn't even been in the building. According to his own badge scan, he was off duty, And yet his signature appeared on a login form for Emma's transfer just 30 minutes later. The document was real, verified. But Kenner had no memory of signing it, no memory of that entire morning. As he stood there trying to make sense of what was happening, a noise echoed from the bedroom, soft, deliberate, like the sound of a drawer being closed from the inside. Kenner moved toward the bedroom with slow, calculated steps, the creak of the wooden floorboards beneath him sounding louder than usual, like the apartment itself was warning him. He stopped just short of the doorway, listening. No footsteps, no breathing, just silence. But the drawer had moved. He was certain. His hand hovered above the doorknob, pulse pounding in his ears. Then he opened the door. The bedroom looked untouched. Bed neatly made, blinds half drawn, filtered sunlight streaking across the carpet. But the nightstand drawer, top right, was slightly ajar. He approached, kneeled, and opened it completely. Inside, folded neatly like it had been waiting, was a copy of a police report. His own. But the handwriting wasn't his. The report described the murder of Emma Lewis, time-stamped. 3 days after the night she disappeared. Beneath that was a printed photo. A body. Face obscured, but same height, same build. The initials EL were scribbled in red ink across the corner. The bottom of the page read, "Do not submit, unconfirmed." There was also a key card, identical, to his department access ID, but with a different photo. Same face, same name. But the eyes in that image were colder, almost intentional. Before he could process more, his phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "Stop looking. You're not the one who turned her in." The contact name read, Miles, other. He dropped the phone, not out of fear, but recognition. That name had appeared once before, on an internal affairs memo he'd buried in his desk months ago. A warning about officer duplication. Supposedly a system error. But now, standing in a room that felt less and less his, Kenner realized something. Chilling. Maybe he wasn't going mad. Maybe he wasn't alone. Maybe someone had already replaced him. The next morning, Kenner filed an internal incident report, but deliberately left key details out. He didn't mention the second ID or the message signed Miles, other. Instead, he marked it as a false alarm, citing exhaustion. But the truth was eating him alive. His reflection felt foreign now. His badge felt like a borrowed item. And most disturbingly, every time he looked through old files, dates and case numbers seemed slightly off. Not wrong, just unfamiliar, like they had been swapped or rewritten by someone who knew his pattern of thinking. As he sat at his desk, eyes scanning Emma Lewis's file for the 100th time, he noticed a small icon blinking at the corner of his screen, a shared drive request. It wasn't from a coworker. The sender's name was Case Original 117B, the exact code from his recent interrogation. Heart racing, he clicked. A folder opened. Inside, a single video clip, time-stamped 2 nights ago. Security footage. The hallway outside his own apartment. He clicked play. A man approached his door. Same build, same jacket, same badge number visible on the shoulder patch. The man looked into the peephole camera, and for a split second, the image glitched. Kenner flinched. The man on screen had his exact face. Not similar, identical. But there was no hesitation in his movements, no fatigue in his posture. He opened the door with Kenner's key, entered. The footage ended. Kenner stared at the frozen frame. There was no record of this in the precinct logs, no notification, no alarm. He checked his keys, nothing missing. But deep down, he felt it. Someone had entered not just his apartment, but his timeline. And the scariest part? No one else was asking questions, because no one else remembered the original version of the case. Kenner didn't sleep that night. Every creak in the hallway, Every flicker of the lamp, every distant siren made him wonder if he was being watched or replaced. He pulled open his drawers one by one, scanning for anything moved, anything altered. Then he opened his notebook. The first 3 pages were untouched. Routine observations, dates, sketches. But then, without warning, the handwriting changed. It was still his style, but more hurried, more angular. Page after page, the ink grew darker. There were words he didn't remember writing. Do not trust the mirror. If you see me again, leave. And at the bottom of one page, a chilling diagram. 2 identical silhouettes standing on either side of a line labeled Event Echo. In a margin, one survives, one resets. Kenner's hands trembled. He slammed the notebook shut, trying to convince himself it was a joke, a prank from a fellow detective, but the pit in his stomach knew better. The night he interrogated, that man, something fractured. Not just in the case, but in the order of his life. He returned to the station the next morning and demanded access to the original files on Emma Lewis. The system wouldn't let him in. His clearance had been revoked. He went to Internal Affairs. No response. He asked around. Who's working the Emma Lewis case? Blank stares. Someone even said, Who's Emma Lewis? Kenner's breath caught in his throat. This wasn't a cover-up. It was a deletion. Layer by layer, everything connected to the case was being wiped. Not digitally, existentially. The more he searched, the less he found. And in the reflection of the precinct's glass doors, he saw something that made his blood freeze. Himself, standing behind him, smiling. Kenner spun around, heart hammering, fists clenched. But the hallway behind him was empty. No one. No sound. Just the lingering echo of his own gasp. He stood frozen for a full minute, then took a trembling step forward, pushing open the nearest office door. Empty. Another. Empty. The entire floor was silent, as if the building itself had stopped breathing. He rushed to the security room, where every hallway, every room, every interrogation cell was under constant surveillance. The technician on duty barely looked up. Kenner demanded to see the footage from the past 24 hours. Reluctantly, the man loaded it. Kenner leaned forward, eyes scanning every frame. At first, everything seemed normal. Routine officers, routine suspects, routine paperwork. But at 2:17 a.m., something impossible happened. A figure, identical to Kenner, walked into interrogation room B, sat down, and waited. For exactly 7 minutes, he did not move. Then he smiled directly into the camera and vanished. The footage didn't glitch. There was no static, no abrupt cut. He simply stopped being there. Kenner recoiled. That's not me, he whispered. That's not me. But the technician only stared at him and said almost casually, You were never in interrogation room B, sir. That room's been closed for months. Kenner shook his head violently. I interviewed a man in that room. He confessed. I have the notes. But when he reached for his coat pocket, the notebook was gone. In its place was a folded index card, typed in red ink. Do not resist the reset. It's already happening. He dropped it like it burned. The technician was already gone. The lights in the surveillance room flickered. And for the first time in his career, Kenner wasn't just questioning the case. He was questioning himself, his memory, his place in this version of the truth. Detective Kenner didn't go home. He couldn't. The station no longer felt like a place of logic or law. It had become a maze of contradictions, and he wasn't sure if he was chasing ghosts or becoming one. He sat alone in his car, parked, beneath a flickering street lamp outside the precinct, gripping the wheel with white-knuckled fists. Rain blurred the windshield, but he didn't turn on the wipers. His eyes were locked on the side mirror. For 45 minutes, he swore he saw someone standing behind the vehicle, not moving, not blinking. When he finally stepped out to confront them, there was only pavement. still damp, but empty. He drove, aimlessly at first, then toward the warehouse. It had been sealed by forensics, crime scene tape still fluttering in the wind. He ducked under it. The building had been cleaned, scrubbed of blood and chaos, but something in the air still trembled. He paced through the aisles like retracing a path he'd only walked in dreams. Then, wedged between two rusted crates, he found it. Isaac's ID badge. Impossible. Forensics had logged all evidence. Yet there it was, cracked, stained, real. He turned it over. On the back, scrawled in red Sharpie, was a date. Today, and beneath it, "This is where you started forgetting." Kenner stumbled backward. His heart pounded not from fear, but recognition. He had been here before. Not last week, not even last month, years ago. Long before he was assigned this district, long before he became a detective. But how? The floor beneath him felt thinner. The air tasted metallic. He heard something distant, his own voice echoing, laughing, arguing, crying, layered over itself, like memories colliding, and then silence. Absolute. The kind of silence that makes you question whether you're alone, or simply the last, to realize you're not. He tried to speak, but his own name stuck in his throat like a foreign language. The warehouse lights buzzed above him, flickering in an unnatural rhythm, like Morse code he was never taught to read. Every step he took felt both familiar and alien, like walking through the blueprint of a life he'd once studied but never lived. Kenner opened his notebook, the one he carried for every case. The pages were blank, not empty, just blank, as if someone had carefully erased everything but the paper itself. He flipped through rapidly, desperate to find proof of who he was, what he'd done, but it was all gone. Then taped to the final page, a photograph, black and white, faded. It showed a man standing in front of this same warehouse. The man's face was turned just enough to reveal the profile. It was him, but younger, wearing a different uniform. No badge, no precinct, just a plain coat. Behind him, spray painted on the warehouse wall in giant letters, "Remember 117B." His hands began to tremble, not from fear, but from awakening. How many times had he come here? How many times had he forgotten? He pulled out his service weapon and placed it on the ground, not out of threat, but resignation, as if he no longer trusted himself to carry it. The door behind him slammed shut. He didn't flinch. Instead, he whispered to the shadows, "I was here before, wasn't I?" The silence didn't answer, but the lights above him blinked twice, then cut out. Total darkness fell, and in it, the distant echo of his own voice replied from somewhere deep within the structure, soft, strained, and devastatingly certain. "Yes, and you didn't come alone." Kenner's breath caught in his throat. Someone, or something, remembered, even if he didn't. The emergency lights buzzed back to life, red, flickering, pulsating like a heartbeat overlaid on concrete. Kenner stood in the warehouse, disarmed and uncertain, but something inside him had shifted. A door cracked open on the far end, revealing a figure limping forward, covered in dust, dried blood, and confusion. It was the man from the photograph. Or maybe a mirror of him. Same jawline, same eyes, same coat, but older, hardened. The man stopped several feet away, looked directly at Kenner, and spoke without moving his lips. "You left me here." The voice echoed, not from the man's throat, but from every corner of the warehouse. Kenner stumbled back, eyes wide, every synapse in his brain firing at once. He couldn't tell what was real anymore. The lights flickered again. Now dozens of photos were pinned to the walls, photos of missing persons, of unidentified bodies, of him in places he didn't remember being. One photo had 117B scratched on the back, and in it, Kenner stood next to a body on the floor. The face blurred, redacted, torn out. His own voice echoed again, this time from a recorder now playing beside the photograph. I didn't mean to forget. They made me. A violent gust of air surged through the space, scattering the photos like feathers from a ripped pillow. Kenner collapsed to his knees, overwhelmed. The man stepped closer. This case was never about finding someone else. It was about finding you. Kenner's hands gripped his own badge like an anchor, but it burned against his skin. He ripped it off and threw it into the darkness. The figure nodded once, then dissolved into shadow, like memory itself being swallowed. And Kenner whispered, for the first time with full clarity, "I know who I am." But the silence replied, "Do you?" Detective Miles Kenner didn't file an official report. Not at first. He returned to the station without the suspect, without physical evidence, without a shred of proof that any of it had happened. Except for one thing. His memory. Or what remained of it. He sat in his car for 2 hours, engine off, watching the rain bead and trail down the windshield like the edges of thoughts that refused to stay still. He replayed the night again and again. The phantom suspect. The duplicate. ID. The voice that sounded like his own. And that final whisper, "Do you?" which still echoed inside his chest like it belonged to a part of himself he had locked away. He didn't sleep. He didn't shower. He didn't speak to anyone for 2 days. On the third morning, he showed up at the precinct with an envelope. It contained 2 photographs, one from the warehouse and another, taken decades ago. Both featured him, one as he was now, the other as a child, standing beside a man who looked eerily similar to the suspect. The caption on the back read, "Case 117B, return to origin." No one knew where the photo came from. It wasn't in any department archive, no timestamp, no metadata. But it was there, tangible, undeniable, and damning. Kenner didn't explain. He simply placed it on Captain Reyes's desk and walked away. She called after him, confused, frustrated, demanding answers. He didn't turn around, just opened the exit door and stepped into the gray morning. The air felt different, heavy, electric, like a storm was coming, but not from the sky, from memory itself. And as he lit a cigarette with trembling fingers, one thought settled quietly in the back of his mind. Maybe the case was never about solving a crime. Maybe it was about remembering one. 3 days later, the man who claimed to be the victim, Nicholas Vale, was found dead. This time, for real. His body surfaced in the Hudson River, face unrecognizable, fingertips burned, and all dental records wiped. There was no way to confirm the identity, except for the laminated list of names found tucked in his soaked back pocket. It was the same list Miles had seen in the warehouse, the one scrawled in 2 handwritings. The forensic team confirmed that one of those handwritings was indeed Miles Kenner's, but he had never written it. Or at least, he didn't remember doing so. The list ended with a name that hadn't been there before. Miles R. Kenner, underlined twice in red ink. The ink was still fresh, untouched by water. When Miles was shown the evidence, he didn't react. He simply stared at it for several minutes, eyes fixed, as if trying to look through the paper and into something else. Something behind the veil of the physical world. The captain tried questioning him. So did Internal Affairs. But Miles offered nothing beyond a quiet statement. "You don't understand. None of this is new." That same night, the security systems at the station glitched. Cameras looped, logs were erased. And when the clock struck 2:17 a.m., the exact time Nicholas had made the first call, power flickered across the entire building. In that blackout, someone left an envelope on Miles's desk. It was unmarked, unsealed. Inside was a single photograph. A jail cell, empty. But if one looked closely at the back wall, beneath the peeling paint and layers of shadows, 3 words were barely visible in red chalk. "Do you remember?" The room it pictured didn't match any known facility. Not in the state, not in the country, not on any record at all. Detective Kenner vanished 48 hours later. No resignation, no trace. His badge was found on the desk, placed neatly, beside the photo of the unknown cell. Alongside it, a single cassette tape, no label. When played, only one thing could be heard: a voice, his voice, repeating the same sentence over and over with growing desperation, as if trying to anchor himself to a memory slipping away. I remember now, and I choose to keep remembering. After a few minutes, the tape degraded into static, followed by the faint sound of a second voice. Female, calm, almost mechanical, whispering, "Subject has re-entered phase loop. Observation suspended." Then silence. Permanent, heavy silence. The case was archived under 117B, sealed by federal request. Officers who worked with Miles refused to speak. Reports vanished. And those who pressed for answers either requested reassignment or abruptly resigned. One intern who digitized the case files kept a printout of the list of names found in the victim's pocket. When he looked closely, something disturbed him. The names kept changing each time he viewed it. His own name appeared on it the third time. He destroyed the file, but he couldn't forget it. None of them could, because that's what haunted them. It wasn't what happened. It was the feeling that whatever this was, it was still happening. Somewhere, to someone, right now, maybe even to you. 1 week after the case was closed, the original call, the one made at 2:17 a.m., was played again by a technician. But the voice had changed. It no longer sounded like Nicholas Vale. It sounded like someone else, someone much closer. "They buried me before I died," it said. "They erased what I saw. But if you're listening, you're part of it now." The call cut, and the line went dead.